Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Boston and Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Hope everyone's having a good week so far. Happy Wednesday, halfway through the week. So everyone just power through to the end of the week. Football is here. Finally, we made it. Preseason is over. The regular season is right around the corner. We are really looking forward to, I know a lot of us over here up in the New England are really looking forward to the start to Patriots season and everything. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Happy to bring you guys another episode. I have a really interesting guest with me on this episode. I mean, hard to summarize really everything that he does. He does it all. I mean, comedian, author, podcast host, Jerry Thornton. How are you doing today?
Yeah, international bon vivant, kind of a world leader in my own way. I wear many hats, even though they mess up this perfectly pH balanced hair. But thanks, Gabby, for having me on. And you're so right about, I would never wish away summer, but when it ends, and sure, if you're a kid and you're going to school, it's a bad time for you. I get it. But once the school buses come, to me, that means it's football season. And I love summer. I've squeezed every last drop out of this one. Now let's kick off the damn ball and see what this team is all about.
No, I agree. I agree with you for sure. I mean, I love summer. It's my favorite time of the year just because I love the warm weather and everything. And I love, barbecues and kind of a lot of different things that come with summer, going to the beach. But once the fall hits and it's football season, it's just such a great time of year.
Oh, yeah. It's, especially if you're somebody that every day wants to pay some attention to football and even turn it into a living, which I do. There are those times when you're in June and you say, there's nothing going on. Like, how can I squeeze the Patriots into a conversation somehow, or in a perfect world, write about them? And it's coming to this point where just every hour and a half, they're making some kind of earth-shattering news. I love the process. This year, especially, there's been so many storylines going into the draft and coming out of the draft and going into training camp and whatever. And then, as you and I speak, we're right in the aftermath of cut down day, which is always a biggie, followed by re-signing the guys that you cut down day, which they've done a lot of. So, yeah, I don't know what we're going to face here, but I compare it not to Christmas, but to an advent calendar, where, Christmas Day, it doesn't come until they're actually playing a real game. But the time leading up to it, every day you pull back that little piece of cardboard and there's some really crappy, stale candy that's been sitting in there for 3 years, but it's still better than not having it.
Hey, that's an interesting comparison to make, though. It's that anticipation of getting to that moment that makes it really exciting.
Right. And then as soon as it happens, you forget everything. You know what I mean? All the frustrations of the preseason games, or all the doubts people had about how the coaching staff is going to be, put together, whatever. And then all that just vanishes in a second. And it's okay. What did they do in their first drive? What did they do in the first quarter? Did they go down to Miami and beat them in the heat or whatever? So yeah, bring it right the hell on.
I'm so excited. I know. And especially just, with Mac Jones going into his second season, I'm excited to see what he can do now that he's kind of, has a year under his belt and in this system. And so I'm excited to see what he can do in this season.
Yeah, Mac Jones, if you don't know this about me, know this, is been filling the goat-shaped hole that was left in my heart at 8:30 in the morning on March 17th of 2020. Not that I remember it, but Tom Brady ruined Irish Christmas for me, possibly forever, by leaving the way he did. And it took a year. We were lost in the wilderness there during 2020. And in December of that year, they went through a 3-game losing streak. With each successive loss, I was like, okay, bright side. Now that quarterback from Alabama that I like so much is starting to fall into their range. It might not be easy. The mock drafts were all over the map at that point, but they might get this guy. And I will never forget. All right, in late March, I said, he's the perfect Patriot. They should draft him. They're going to draft him either at 15 or maybe even possibly drop down. Who knows? And then, if you recall, they're sitting at 15, and then the 14th pick is on the board, and it says there's been a trade. And now, like, my heart is in my throat, right? I started convulsing. I was having like an out-of-body experience. WebMD confirmed I was having stroke-like symptoms. And then real quickly, it said the Jets pick is in. It was like, the Jets aren't looking quarterback. They just got Zach Wilson. And so I'm running around the house screaming Mac Jones's name. And my long-suffering and extremely patient Irish Rose said to me, I'm sorry, who's this Mac Jones you're talking about? I go, I've been talking about this guy nonstop since right after Thanksgiving. Like, do you not listen to a thing I say? And then, of course, the Patriots also wasted no time. Like, that pick came right in. Whereas if you remember, Jacksonville, to get Trevor Lawrence, ran out the clock. They used up all 15 minutes. We all
knew that they were going to be picking him.
Yeah, these guys knew it when they took the job. You know, it's why they took the job. But anyway, the Patriots got Mac Jones. Last year, he was everything that we could have reasonably hoped he would be, not just in terms of performance, which is, you know, the alpha and omega. It's where it all begins, but just the other stuff, like how hard he worked, the off-season workouts, showing up to you know, being the first guy out of the tunnel at training camp, staying after practice to do extra throws, doing the off-season workouts, and being a good teammate. Like, I don't know if you saw the video that Kendrick Bourne took of draft night, where Mac Jones threw a party at his house. And you look at the guys that he'd invited there, and there were veterans, there were young guys, there were offensive guys, there were defensive guys. Devontae Parker had been a Patriot for about like an hour and a half. He was there. It was like, okay, I like, you know, Brady for all the great that he did. And I'm still going through some issues with the way that relationship came to an end. I'm still trying to do some healing, and I'm getting a lot of therapy for it. But, you know, he tended to hang out with an extremely small group of his boys. You know, you looked at the guys he went to the Kentucky Derby with or something. It kind of seemed like he had this little core. And if you were just some rookie or some guy who just arrived, you know, he didn't have a hell of a lot of use for you. But Mac Jones is just, I had a punch list. I walked around with it on a clipboard, and I checked every single box with this guy in the first year. And, you know, hopefully that continues, and I think it will.
Yeah, I feel like some Patriots fans had really high expectations for him in his first season, but people had to keep in mind that he was a rookie and he was going to make some rookie mistakes, and there's things he had to get acclimated to. And, you know, Patriots fans are so spoiled with coming off of Brady for as long as we had him for. So obviously we weren't used to a rookie quarterback and having to have somebody come in and learn the system and adjust. But I really liked right when he came in, just his attitude and how he felt like, you know, he really, really was invested in learning this playbook as quickly as he could, just getting acclimated to the Patriots system. And I feel like just obviously there are some parallels with where he came from at Alabama to the Patriots organization. And so it just seems like, yes, there were some really talented quarterbacks that came out of that draft class overall, but I feel like Mac is the one that fit the Patriots system the most, that I kind of saw as the person who would be able to succeed in a Belichick run system more so than any of those other quarterbacks that were drafted ahead of him.
For sure. And, you know, understanding too that he goes to camp, and until like that final week, he was practicing with the twos. You know, without exception, Cam Newton was always playing with the first stringers, and he got all the first reps or whatever. So, you know, he gets named the starter. I think it was right before the last preseason game against the Giants, whatever, and plays well in that one. And yes, there's going to be hiccups for sure, and there were. But at no point could you say that he looked like he didn't belong in the NFL. You know, we've all seen guys who just give off that vibe like this is just, the moment is too big for them. That never happened with him. I will reference the Dallas game where he threw a pick six, threw a really bad pick six to, was it Micah Parsons? Yeah. Yes.
I do remember that. I was at that game against the Cowboys. That was a crazy game.
Right. And look, inexcusable throw, while you can also say, if you throw a pick to Micah Parsons, you're not part of a tiny exclusive club.
That was true.
Yeah, they don't make jackets for that club because they couldn't afford them because so many guys have already done that. But then the very next play from scrimmage, he hits Kendrick Bourne for a 75-yard touchdown. You said, okay, that's what you want out of a guy, right? How does he respond to adversity like that? But to me, when he really proved himself was the week prior. Again, in a loss. Wait, do I have the schedule right? Anyway, week 4. Not to get too cute with it. Week 4, that game against Tampa, which to me was my emotional Chernobyl, where I said, like, I wouldn't have gone to that game if someone gave me tickets because I just couldn't hack it.
Couldn't do it, yeah.
Mac Jones was, by everybody's opinion, by any way you measure it, the better quarterback on the field that day. In a huge moment, the weight of the world on his shoulders, he puts together a drive at the end. Yeah, it stalled out. It was a long kick for big kick Nick Folk, and he couldn't land it. But still, you said that moment wasn't too big for Jones. So from then on, he had my full confidence, and then went on a 7-game winning streak, takes him to the playoffs. The defense collapses down the end, but you look at that playoff game, and you can't say that was on him. He played well. He did not play like a rookie, and that's all you can ask.
Yeah, that game against Tampa was so intense. That definitely had playoff kind of vibes. The pressure that came with that game felt like a playoff vibe almost. And so the fact that he was able to rise to the occasion in a game like that, with obviously all the history surrounding that game and kind of what was at stake, I thought was really, really cool to see him in that moment. And he was able to, I agree with you. I think he looked like the better quarterback in that game, which is a lot to say when you're going up against somebody like Brady, who obviously is so familiar with playing in Foxborough. And so that was really cool to see for me. And it was unfortunate how that game ended because obviously Folk doesn't usually miss a lot of those. But the fact that it came down to that was a really competitive game. And I think a lot of people before the game thought that they were going to get smoked by Tampa. And, I was kind of mixed on that. I was like, yeah, there is the potential for this game to be a huge blowout and a disaster for the Patriots, or they could surprise people and actually be in this game. And to be able to see Mac rise to the occasion, that's when I was like, wow, I think we're in good hands here with this kid, because he's going to be able to show that he can produce in high pressure situations. And yes, that playoff game, there were a lot of issues. The Bills just were the better team. That just is what it is. But Mac to me still looked like he can perform in games like that. And I'm glad that he now has that playoff exposure under his belt too. So now going into this season, he is used to playing in those high pressure types of games, which has to excite people for this year.
Oh yeah. And tell me you don't love the fact that he has a photo of that game in his locker with his head down. And he had the final score scribbled on there, 47-17. I like. Well, again, what more could you ask of a guy other than moments don't seem to be too big for him? Again, he played at Alabama, and sure, that team can be stacked with talent, but every game for them has national championship implications. Like they can't go play Auburn and have a hiccup because the consequences are too dire. And one of the recurring knocks you heard about him going into the draft was, okay, well, he had a lot of talent around him. True. But Bill Walsh used to say, when you're scouting a guy, don't look at what's around him or whatever. Just look at the plays, look at what he does. And he certainly, gets an A on every throw that he made in that season. I think he had something like 48 touchdowns and like a single digit interceptions or something. But the fact that he had talent around him to me was a plus, because he commanded a huddle filled with first round alpha males along the line and at the receiver spot. And he stepped in there and he looked at all 10 guys in the eye, and he was the one who was in charge, and nobody ever questioned that. That's a thing you can't teach. If you have to tell your quarterback, hey, you got to start really leading here, you got to take charge. you're done before you've begun. And no one has had to say that to him. So he used that skill to go to Foxborough, and now he's throwing in the preseason to, I don't know, like Gunnar Olszewski, or actually he was already gone from the Patriots then, but like Trey Nixon and and JJ Taylor or whatever. And then he takes over the first team huddle, and there's Hunter Henry, and there's Nelson Aguilar, and there's David Andrews or whatever, and he took charge of that. And a lot of the players, even on the defensive side of the ball, Matthew Slater, and special teamer, has commented on how, oh yeah, his teammates around him will do anything for him. His line will ball out for him because he has whatever that intangible trait is that they can't measure it at the combine, Gabby. You can't measure an immeasurable. And
no, it's true.
Yeah, his immeasurables are off the chart, but that's a stupid comment because you can't chart an immeasurable. Otherwise, it would be measured. But you get my point.
No, it's so true. And there's no way for anybody, us who are watching games, to know how a player's going to be personality-wise when it comes to that leadership, because that's obviously something that exists off the field too. And we can see from an on-field perspective how he's, kind of good at rallying his team. But it's so important. And I feel like that's something that people don't always talk about as much, is that ability to be able to lead and have your teammates trust you. Because if your teammates don't trust you as a quarterback, then that's going to just ruin that team chemistry too. So I feel like it's cool how highly his teammates speak of him, and the fact that they trust Mac and they feel like they can rely on him, because that's huge for a team like this who, obviously was going through some changes last year. It's going to be interesting to see how this season goes. But I think, this team, I think, is going to be ready for this season. Obviously, they're in a tough division still. It's I think Miami got better this year. The Jets even, I think, improved a little bit too. So I still think it's Buffalo's division. But I think that with how close the Patriots were to Buffalo last year, record-wise, and how they were kind of neck and neck with the Bills in terms of record, it's going to be interesting to kind of see if that gap between the two teams when they play against each other is a little bit less now. Because when you saw the teams play head-to-head, you just saw that Buffalo was just a better team and was ahead of them. But I'm interested to see if that gap is a little bit closer now, or if the Patriots are still kind of that far behind Buffalo. So I'm going to be definitely looking at that this season.
Yeah, it's, the Patriots improved. Of that, yeah. I am convinced. But everyone improves. Like, at least everyone thinks they've improved. And ultimately, it's, your division is like a shark. Like, you got to keep swimming forward or else you're going to drown. And if the Patriots didn't add some guys and everybody else does, then they're going to end up being a dead shark. But I think what they clearly did, like the lesson that we can take out of those last two games against Buffalo, and I'll put that one in the wind and the storm or whatever, put that aside, because that was a game unlike anything you're ever going to see again. But those last two games where Buffalo's punter, like, didn't have to throw his uniform in the hamper at the end of the game. Like, he should have been charged with a personal day. You know what I mean? Because you didn't have to work. You literally could have stayed home. We didn't need you.
Could have just watched the game on TV.
Yeah, exactly. If they played him again, 3 more times in the postseason, again, they wouldn't have needed a punter at all. And I think what we can say, judging by the way the Patriots handled their personnel in the aftermath of that, is they said the number one thing we have to do is to get younger and more athletic, particularly at the linebacker spot. And I mean, you look at the guys that they let go. To me, their best guy at covering, boundary to boundary, 53 1/3 yards, was Kyle Van Noy. They let him go. Jamie Collins is a freakish athletic guy. They let him go. Dante Hightower still hasn't signed with anybody. Like, didn't retire, just went into free agency and just vanished into the cornfield. I don't know if he's planning on playing. Like, is he gonna, is he gonna pull a Gronk on retirement? Well, he can't, because he didn't retire. But anyway, so I think what they've done is decide that, okay, we've drafted high at this position the last couple of years. And when I say linebacker, I mean the off the ball guy and also the outside linebacker opposite Matt Judon. And so I think they're saying, all right, we're going to rely on these guys that we drafted and have tried to develop. And, they put Cameron Grown on waivers. He made it through. They re-signed him. There was a guy who went to Michigan, had a lot of potential, got hurt and fell in the draft. So maybe they see him as part of the solution. You still got those guys that they redshirted, your Anthony Jennings and your Ronnie Perkins or whatever. Without that, if that position hasn't been fixed, then everything else they do is going to be without meaning because they're just going to watch Josh Allen shred them all day long and probably Tua as well. Zach Wilson, even when he's healthy, I'm yet to really be that worried about. But yeah, I just think the whole division improved, but I'm going to put the Patriots among that because I like the additions that they made.
Yeah, me too. I definitely like them a lot. I think this was a productive offseason and a productive draft overall. I think that they are looking pretty good going into this season. Well, in terms of the preseason, was there anything that you saw that overall that you're concerned about that they did that you feel like needs to be addressed before the season starts? Or were you pretty happy overall with what you saw from a lot of these young players?
Yeah, just stating the obvious, the way the offense always seemed to need 3 or 4 series to get started. And I compared it to, here's the thing. I make a lot of sports metaphors. Unless I'm talking about sports, then I make other metaphors. I can't help it. It's made me a career. But anyway, to me, they were like that first time you're trying to start your snowblower or your lawnmower. It's been sitting for a while and you hit that rubber gasket thing to get the fuel going and you put the choke on. And then sometimes it still takes a half a dozen pulls. And that's what the starters on offense were like virtually all through the preseason. And I will include the scrimmages and the joint practices that they ran as well. There was one at Las Vegas where, they couldn't do anything the first half a dozen times they got the ball until they went to a 2-minute drill at the end. And then it was like precision, like just hitting the guys. Everything was a positive play. This offseason, there were just too many negative plays. The last game against the Raiders was just, they start off the very first play as an 8-yard connection to Devontae Parker. You're like, great. They try an outside run and there's, 4 defenders in the backfield and it goes for a loss. And 2 plays later, they're punting. So it all just has to get in sync. Starting with the offensive line, saw a lot of just missed blocks and the outside stretch runs just weren't going anywhere. That has to be cleaned up. But, understanding that they've installed a new offense and these things take time. You can't just give these guys, Rosetta Stone software and they learn the language overnight. Like it takes time and it takes practice. And at this point, it looked to us like they're not to the point where they're conversational in this language yet. They're still checking the guidebook to say, can you please show me the way to the train station? And I like to think that it's not impossible. What they're doing is a variation on what half the league is doing now. They just changed it for the first time in 20 years. So to the veterans, it's got to feel weird. And it's about all 11 guys on the field at the same time speaking fluently in that new language.
Yeah, we definitely knew there was going to be some changes, especially, with Josh McDaniels being gone now. And there's an adjustment period involved. And that's kind of what these practices in the preseason are for, is to be able to get acclimated to stuff like that. But yeah, that game against the Raiders was tough to watch because offensively, they just couldn't get anything going really at all. And every time it seemed like they might have a promising drive, everything just got completely killed. And so there's definitely offensively things that need to be cleaned up. Overall, I thought the defense looked pretty good in those 3 preseason games. Overall, I like a lot of what I saw defensively, which is
good. I would say, beginning with the with the defensive line. I think that's a strength on the team.
Yep.
Belichick was asked what he thinks the strength is, and by Chris Berman, no less, after getting a rousing round of applause by Belichick, like respect, just showing more mutual respect. But he said safety. He thinks that's his deepest position. So okay, you've got the high and low of your defense sandwiched with some quality. You just have to fill those slices with some quality cold cuts. And I think that they have the potential for that, but until it's really tested, we're just not going to know, And when we talk about the linebacker spot, keep it in mind, we're really talking about two guys on the field at a time now, because they're playing a base nickel. I mean, Kyle Duggar's not leaving the field. Adrian Phillips isn't leaving the field. So you really just have to get two guys who can, fill in behind what looks like a really good defensive line with, they clearly love Davin Godchaux. And we're all huge Christian Barmore fans like that. That was a grand slam there. So yeah, I'm with you. When you looked at that offense, did you feel like this offensive line is how I pictured it was going to be? Because didn't they feel like a strength of the team going into the
and that's why that was a concern for me, because that was something that I thought they wouldn't have to be as concerned about, because I thought that was something that was going to be one of their best qualities going into the season. And now I'm like, well, they need to fix something.
Yeah, pretty much all of it. They just are, they're they're a boy band because there's 5 of them. You know how every boy band has to have 5.
It's so true. It can't be 4.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, was the one that Nick Lachey was in that had 4, and they were just objectively terrible. You need 5 guys. So that's a boy band that they don't have their steps down yet. They're still working on the choreography. Not like a really good K-pop band. See, now I'm just overdoing the metaphors here.
I like the metaphors, though. I'm enjoying it.
Gabby, stop me before I sub-reference again. But you just see like there's 5 guys who are all capable. I know a lot of people have problems with Isaiah Wynn, but look, he's at right tackle now. Allow him to handle right tackle. Thanks. But Cole Strange, clearly they're high on him. All the scouts were.
They seem to like him.
Yeah, I love Michael Onwenu. David Andrews is a staple of this system and has been for years. And when they got Trent Brown and then drafted Strange, I said, okay, check that box. They're all set at offensive line. And right now it hasn't looked like it, but there's no way that a month into the season, it's going to look like it did last Friday or the Friday before that. And Belichick said, 5 or 6 weeks is when you really know what you are as a team and when you can evaluate it. And that's something Bill Parcells used to say, like, this is not a new philosophy, but we're all people of the moment. We're all got that football ADHD where we, what do we want? Instant gratification. When do we want it? What do you think?
Right now.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's true. They're going to clean a lot of this stuff up. And that's why people can't really think too much into what happens during the preseason, because obviously that is what that's for, to see where you're at and see what you need to improve before the regular season starts. So I'm pretty sure that even, by the time we hit September 11th, when the season starts, I think they'll look a lot better just to begin with off the bat. But then obviously give it a few games, I think that offensive line is going to look a lot cleaner.
Well, riddle me this then, Gabby, because I want your take on this. The other day, I'm out golfing with some friends. The lightning warning goes off, and it's like, now I've got a choice. Risk getting hit by lightning, hoping that maybe I'm going to get a superpower out of the deal, or go hit the 19th hole and have beers with these knuckleheads. Well, we chose that. And if you can imagine me in a bar, but, try to stretch your imagination on that one. And we went around the table. Okay, how do you think they start? How do you think the first month goes? What's their record? What's your answer to that?
For the first 4 games?
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually go with like 2-2. I think they are decent to start off with, but I think we're gonna see in those first few games some things that are gonna have to be fixed. I don't think they're gonna have a really strong start, nor do I think they're gonna start off poorly. I'm gonna go with somewhere in the middle and go with 2-2, and then after the first month of the season, I do think that they change some things, they fix some things, and then they kind of have a stronger second month than the first month. I think starting the season in Miami is probably a good thing because for some reason they are allergic to playing at that place, and so I'd rather get that over with at the beginning than have that game be further down the road when it comes to possibly clinching a playoff spot and they're stuck going down to Miami.
You know what? You and I just had a stepbrothers moment. Did we just become best friends? Yup. Do you want to do karate in the garage? Yep. Because I said 2-2 as well. And that's not disastrous. In fact, if you look at some of their best years, that's the kind of start that they got off to. 2003, which was the beginning of the best back-to-back seasons in NFL history. They started out 2-2. That's who you got the Tom Jackson saying, let's face it, they hate their coach, whatever. 2014, that was the Trent Dilfer. They're just not good anymore. And that felt like the sky was falling. And that 2014 season, I will remind everybody, the final four teams in the NFL that year were the Patriots, the Colts, also 2-2, Green Bay, also 2-2, and Seattle, who were 3-3. The good teams figure it out. And it's becoming a cliche by now, but it's a true one, that the first month of the season is an extension of preseason based on the rules now, the limited practice, the limited padded practices and so on. So the good teams self-evaluate, figure out where they are. Like you said, what works, what needs to be improved on, what they need to scrap or whatever. And I trust that they've got the people in place to handle it because they're all led by a guy who has handled it before. You know what? Remember 2017 when they first got Stephon Gilmore? And 4 weeks into the season, they were 2-2, and they weren't just bad. They were on a historically bad pace, that defense was. There was one game where they gave up 292 passing yards. The rest were all 300-yard games. Some of them were just complete slappies, too, just nobody. And they still had their bad games. Stephon Gilmore looked lost. Like I refer all the time to this one play where he gave up like a completion and he stand there with his hands up in the air like this. Nobody was on the same, knew what the other one was doing. And they figured it out like that. They go to a Super Bowl. And I think they ended up like 5th in the league in points surrendered. So it's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, if they start out 2-2, even 1-3 like last year, as long as they, seem like they're making progress, I can live with that. And you got an extra year, an extra game now to where 10-7 is going to be good enough. But I still like them for double-digit wins this year.
I actually have 10-7 as my prediction on the dot. That's realistically, I think they will be able to win 10 games. I do think that will hopefully be enough to get a playoff spot, although that entire AFC West division is nuts right now. But I think I actually do have them going 10-7. And like you said, obviously with how they started last year, there was definitely a bit of panic from some people after the first month of the season, which makes sense because, they did not look good. But again, rookie quarterback, a lot of changes that they were going through last year. But the fact that they were able to turn that around, if they start off 2-2, that's fine because that's not anything that you can't overcome and come back from. That's a decent start, I'd say. And,
Sure.
they have some tough games this year, but I do think that from a comfortability standpoint, I think that they will look better than last year. And I think this season is going to be another one where they are going to be in the playoff hunt. I think that they should be able to hopefully sneak into a wild card spot if they go 10-7. It's hard to say for sure, but I would be totally fine with that record.
Yeah, and last year too, there was a direct analog to really one of the most significant regular season losses in Patriots history. Weird as that sounds. And I'm going back to 2001, where you probably weren't born yet, but
I was pretty young though.
Okay. They had a game. They were struggling early in the year. They went on a bit of a run. Well, just kind of righted the ship a little bit, but they were 5-4. They go into a Sunday night game, just like that one against Tampa, against the defending world champion Rams at the time. Well, the Rams had won it 2 years earlier, but still, that a championship team with an MVP quarterback, an MVP running back, and the Patriots fought them close. Were within one score until the end, and Kurt Warner leads the Rams on this like drive to nowhere that ate up like 10 minutes a game clock, and they ran out the clock, and just they never got the ball back in their hands. But to a person, they all came out of that game going, we can really compete with the best. I mean, we're not happy about the loss, but we've got a new quarterback. We got a young team. We're figuring out, but we know that we can play the Rams tough. And of course, a few months later, they're playing them in the Super Bowl and they're beating them. And that's what a lot of that Tampa game reminded me of last year. Like, okay, this team, they're 1-3, and that's not acceptable, but they're better than the record indicates. And that's, shortly thereafter when they went on that run and blew everybody's doors off. So, hope I mean, in a perfect world, you don't go into that hole first and have to dig your way out of it. But, they've upgraded at several positions. Clearly Devontae Parker is now.
I'm excited for him. I'm really excited about him.
Absolutely. And, his ability to do the things that we thought, I hate to even ruin your podcast by bringing up this guy's name, but N'Keal Harry, the things that we thought he would do, which is be tough, be physical, win the 50-50 balls, like one of those guys who is open even when he's not open, just because he's going to use his body and strong hands and he's going to pull balls down. Never did it once. Not in practice, not when he was covered when he wasn't covered. Whereas Parker is that guy, like, he's led the league in contested catch rate. He's led the league in contested catches too, which you say, okay, why is he not getting open more often? But whatever, I think Jones has already developed a trust with him. I think there's every reason to think Nelson Aguilar is going to be more of an asset than he was last year. Sometimes it takes a guy a year or two to just kind of get acclimated to what's going on here. And I would say the same with Jonnu Smith. He missed training camp, not training camp, he missed OTAs his first season, had a couple of drops, basically looked lost. And we don't need 70 catches out of him. You need 40, 50 just to be a compliment to Hunter Henry and get back to the two tight end offense that has eluded this team since who went all Dexter on everybody. The tight end who shall not be named. Thanks, Urban Meyer.
We can't. No, I agree with you. I think, there's a lot of things to be excited about going into this season with this team. I think they're showing a lot of promise when it comes to their ability to hopefully be able to compete against good teams, because they do have some tough teams on their schedule. But I think, obviously they will run into some problems, but I think the Patriots are right in the mix with a lot of those other playoff caliber teams that are fighting for wild card spots. I think the Patriots are going to be right in the mix with those teams. And so I'm definitely not, I don't want to, give them less credit than I genuinely feel. And what I feel is that they will, I'm thinking somewhere around 10-7 in that vicinity. Mm-hmm. And I think that they will be better than they were last year. And I think there's going to be certain things that we're going to notice that they are doing better than they did last year.
Well, your lips to God's ears, because you know what? We deserve this. We haven't had a championship parade in this town in 3 years.
It's too long.
Does anybody realize what that's like for people of our, dedication and intelligence and good looks or whatever? Like we deserve this, and that's far, far too long. Look, we went through the Cam Newton year. with all the COVID opt-outs or whatever and the empty stadiums, and then having to watch Brady go off and live this perfect life with his new family that he started elsewhere while we're up here just suffering away. And we've Belichick spent the most money a couple of years ago, developed a quarterback, added some pieces around him, and it's not too much to ask that they not only get to the playoffs, but play like a playoff team. It's been two straight losses, two one and dones over the last 3 years. And I don't know how other franchises handle it. I don't know how all those years, the people who loved Peyton Manning could stand there and watch him go one and done a record 8 times. Yeah.
Repeatedly.
Exactly. Or, God forbid the way the Jets are. I mean, I've written a book called 6 Rings. I need to turn it into 7 rings in the worst way. Now, if I was a Jets fan, I could have written 1 ring in like 1971 and it would still be just as relevant today. But that's not our life.
It's not. We're not Jets fans.
We've been through too much. It's our birthright to get another duck boat parade in this town. By God.
Would you write another book that's titled 7 Rings if that does happen?
Interesting thing. The first book I wrote was called From Darkness to Dynasty, and it's about the terrible old early dysfunctional days of the Patriots leading right up to, and I hate to give away the ending of the book, but it's right in the title, to 2001 when they started the dynasty. Sometimes you can give it away. I mean, like we all saw Titanic, right? I mean, you saw where that one was going as soon as they named a movie Titanic.
We all knew, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Finding Nemo, they find Nemo. It's right. Again,
That was true.
But so the publisher came back to me and they said, okay, here's one. We call it 5 Rings. I go, beautiful. Okay, I got it. There's so much I can talk about in this, not just the wins, but the weird stuff, the scandals, the way the league reacted to them, how the Patriots became the most hyper relevant team in all of American sports, how they went from like their darlings to, the focus of evil in the universe or whatever. And so it was called 5 Rings. Terrific. The Patriots turned it irrelevant in 4 months. It came out in September. They win the Super Bowl as soon as the new year begins. And I said, so now I'm the author of like an obsolete book. It's the laser disc of literature. And so they sold the rights back to me. And another publisher said, sure, why don't you put a new ending on that? Like, terrific. So I would absolutely love to add some more chapters to that, although I like to think that the Mac Jones era is going to deserve its own series of books.
So you would start a new series, is what we're hearing right now.
Well, that's the hope. But for now, the fact that I've written sort of 3 books, basically 2, is actually more than I've read in my career. So I got that going for me. So.
Well, everybody who's tuning in definitely should read those books for sure. You probably have them back there.
6 Rings available wherever fine books are sold, including the Patriots Pro Shop, by the way.
Is it really?
Very happy to say that. Yeah. Although I've been in there a few times and sometimes you go and there's a lot of copies and then it's just down to a couple. I'm like, okay, that's good. This is good. No one's.
So people are actually getting it.
Yeah, exactly. No one's just saying, well, what are we going to do with this? I don't know. We can start a bonfire with them. No, it's been a great run and it's really fun to have somebody reach out to you and say, I read your book. I listened to the audio book when I was driving across the country or whatever, because it's both halves of this, from the first 40 years where they were just irrelevant and played in the worst stadium in the world to the last 20, now 2 years and counting, have been amazing stories. I don't think there's anything that's been like it in American life, really, in American pop culture, to have somebody go from like completely irrelevant, they're broke, they're always like threatening to move to some other city, to becoming like the top story on the network news at times, like the network news, like the Patriots take some air out of some footballs, which never happened, but that's leading the nightly newscasts across the country. It almost went to the Supreme Court. I'm like, this is incredible. Gabby, I keep thinking that one of these days I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be in a hospital bed. And I'm going to say, what happened? They said, oh, well, the Patriots were playing the Snow Bowl against the Raiders and you bumped your head and you've been in a coma. So none of this happened. You don't write for Barstool Sports. You have some crappy job working for the Massachusetts court system. Tom Brady, no, they put him back on the bench and he never amounted to anything. You know what I mean? So
they didn't win any Super Bowls. You're just imagining that.
Exactly. So if that's
this
the
is just
case,
a fantasy that you're living in.
oh yeah, and if that's the case, if this is all just me in the Matrix, oh, I'm taking the blue pill and I'm staying right in this Matrix. This is the best possible timeline, and I don't want to go back to reality if this is not it.
Yeah, one day you wake up and none of this happened. That would be crazy.
Yep, and I'm still just saying, would it be great to see them like go to a Super Bowl and not get their doors blown off once? Nope. So yeah. And if this is not reality, at least my imagination is drumming up nice people like yourself who have me on their podcast, and we come on here and we have a bunch of laughs.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a good time for sure. It's been fun having you on here.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and it's the first time we've talked. I hope it's not the last.
Definitely not.
Do you go to games ever?
I do, yeah. So one of my best friends, her dad has season tickets, and so he doesn't go to all of the home games. So he'll let me and her and a couple of our other friends go to those games that he doesn't use the tickets for. So that's nice.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I don't go often. I'm better at my job if I'm sitting at home and I can replay. And I write these like 2,000 word recaps called knee-jerk reactions. It's really the rock upon which my writing church has been built all these years, and I do it. It's a labor of love. It's exhausting, but I'm better if I just am home taking notes and watching the games. When I do go, I end up having to come home afterwards and watch the game because you just miss so much. But having said that, I get to a game, even if it's just a tailgate for a bit, and then go home and watch it. You and I have to have a beer.
Definitely, yes. We would definitely will make that happen. So we'll obviously be in touch, and I will definitely love to have you back on the show at some point too.
Great. I hope we get a chance to do it. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me plug my wares here and try to earn a living in Depression era America here. But
gotta do what you gotta do.
Listen, I'm so excited about the season, and it's all the more fun to be able to like talk about it with someone who's just as excited, because there's still people in my life who barely care and, and can't stand listening to me jibber jabber about it. But I've had a blast talking to you, Gabby. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as always, I appreciate everyone tuning in to the show too. Go Pats. Hope you all enjoy the opening week of the football season, which is here finally around the corner. So looking forward to, watching games and hearing everybody's thoughts on the team as the season progresses. But again, thank you so much for joining me. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week. And as always, go Patriots.